I feel like I'm spending every single second of my class just dealing with issues. Help! We're going to tackle this question in today's episode. Well, welcome back to the Teach for the Heart podcast, where we tackle teaching challenges from a biblical perspective. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. Becky Jones, one of our amazing Teach for the Heart Plus mentors and our team member, is joining us. Becky, thanks for being with us today.
Happy to be here.
And we are going to talk about this question that someone asked us. So let me read her question and then we'll kind of dive into it. So here's her question. I felt like I wanted, I don't know what, I guess reassurance. I feel like if I let my guard down for a teeny split second, the class descends into chaos. I teach 5 sections and this applies to one more than the others. She said the school year is officially over, but I'm looking towards next year. This year was particularly difficult and I didn't finish my curriculum. And I fear that even with all the tools and support, it was because of classroom management. I guess what I'm asking is, how can I be the queen of classroom management and not spend every split second of the 40 minutes keeping down issues? Becky, I thought this was a really good question. And I think this actually came up in our Teach for the Heart Plus mentorship and we talked about her. But I was like, she is not the only one that feels like this, that feels like I'm just constantly dealing with issues and I don't have time to teach.
Definitely not.
Yeah, this is definitely something that happens a lot. And so as I was thinking about this one, a few different things came into my mind. But one thing that really came to my mind was that it's not an either or between do I deal with the issues or do I have time to teach? It can feel like that. And I think sometimes we find ourselves in that because the chaos got to a level where that's kind of where we're at. But ideally, when you start off the school year right with really clear expectations and you do actually invest that time, it might be kind of constant that first week or two. You can establish a classroom where that time you have to spend being on it goes down, 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 down. And the time you spend correcting also then goes down, down, down. It never gets to 0, but it can get to a very manageable level. So we'll talk a little bit more how to do that. But Becky, have you seen that dynamic at all?
Oh, absolutely. Because if you do just try to push through ignoring is a good strategy, but it should not be your only strategy. And if you try to just push through and ignore all the issues and hope that they're going to go away, that's when you are spending all your time teaching, but pretty soon that's going to be constantly interrupted and you won't actually have regained any teaching time by not dealing with issues. Like you said, you got to deal with them early on consistently, and that will help regain that time.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation, and they want to let you know that applications are now open for the 2026 Faith and Nation Student Forum. Each fall, the Herzog Foundation hosts an incredible 4-day retreat for outstanding high school seniors from Christian schools and homeschool co-ops. The Faith and Nation Student Forum gives students the opportunity to strengthen their Christian worldview and engage with government leaders. Students can also participate in team challenges, outdoor adventures, and social events designed to build leadership skills and lasting friendships. The Herzog Foundation covers the cost of the retreat, all except travel, making this an amazing opportunity for your high school seniors. Help them apply. Applications close September 18th. Learn more and apply at herzogfoundation.com. Now, back to our program. So that's our big encouragement, and we're going to have a lot of podcast episodes about this throughout this year. We actually have the training coming up next week that you're not going to want to miss, called Back to School Classroom Management and Back to School Classroom Management and Motivation. You can sign up for that at teachfortheheart.com/training. And we're really kind of going to dive in on how do you start that school year right so that you don't find yourself where you are, because that first week really can. I mean, it's not like a total make or break. You can make progress back and or either way, but you're either setting yourself up for things to be like very, very difficult or for things to be more manageable. And that's why that first week and being on it and having those expectations right at the top so kids don't fall into bad habits just makes such a difference. Becky, what else came to your mind when you heard this question?
One of the first things that came to mind for me was just kudos for thinking about what can I do differently? What am I in control on? And asking for God's wisdom and guidance as you reflect on that question. It's so easy for us as teachers, as humans, to get stuck in these are the things I can't control, therefore I can't do anything. And that's just not true. There is a lot you can't control. That is truth. You don't have to ignore that. But what is within your control and making those positive changes in that area is I mean, it's what God's asked us to do. He's given us a life in a world where there is plenty outside of our control. And he says, trust me with all of that. I want you, with my guidance and strength, to make positive changes in the ways that I have given you power and strength to do that. And so just being able to dive into that in this question and not focus constantly on these are things I can't do anything about, therefore I'm going to do nothing. That is a huge first step, humongous first step. So kudos for that.
Yeah, and I think that that is so important, right? Because sometimes we just get really frustrated, and when we're focusing on the things we can't control, like our students' behavior, it's very demoralizing, very discouraging at times, right? Or how we feel about it just depends on what the kids did that day. But that's where when we focus on, yeah, what we can control, what I can control how I respond. I can control whether I've actually thought through where the line is in my classroom. I can control do I have a plan for what I'm going to do when students do this, right? So all these things that you are working on, that's what you're really focusing on is what you can control, and then how the students respond any given day. Some days will be worse than others. Some classes will be worse than others. But once again, starting out the year with those that will make, I think, a even bigger difference in the more difficult classes, because some of those classes, once they get going, it is very hard to pull it pull it back.
And you did mention for this specific teacher, and a lot of us have been in the situation, myself included, you are going to be possibly starting next year with some of those repeat classes. Like they're going to be the same group that you had. And I'll be honest, it is harder to reset the expectations for those kids, even at the beginning of the year. But the beginning of the year, having that fresh start, even if it's the same group of kids you had 2, 3 months ago, it really can make a difference if you do a total reset and are like, nope, okay, this is how we're running the class. And that don't get stuck in these kids were awful in this class last year and I just could never manage it. That doesn't have to be the truth this year. You can make strides even though it's the same group of kids.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that probably is what this situation is, and I had that exact same thing happen between my first and second year. The one class graduated up, and I didn't have them, but the other horrible class was like, I'm two of them. It was like, yep, I'm facing them again. And yeah, it's not as good of a but it is still this magical time where you can make this huge step. And that happened. And you just say things are going to be different this year. It's a new year. This is what I expect this year. And then so I guess for you coming into next year, I would expect have that hypervigilance, be ready with that hypervigilance, but expect I'm going to be super hypervigilant for a week or two. And by then, you shouldn't need to be constantly correcting. I guess one other thing I'll just put in mind here though is also make sure that it's not just always verbal correction. If all you're doing is saying over and over, stop talking, stop talking, stop, but nothing else ever happens, they are going to very quickly realize she's just going to say this 100 times and nothing's going to happen. So that's another thing to just consider. Is there anything else that happens in your plan if all your verbal corrections aren't doing anything? You might want to rethink, ask other teachers in your school, what do you do for this? What works for you? And have something else that happens, whether it's a consequence, whether it's like, well, we're not doing this activity, whatever it is, what's going to happen. Because yeah, if in the beginning of the year, you're not doing, if it doesn't lead to anything beyond just you saying it over and over and over, that it'll lose its power pretty quickly. And then you really are just talking over and over.
Yeah, what comes to mind for me is the Peanuts cartoons where the "mwah, mwah, mwah, mwah" teacher voice, like, it's just in one ear, out the other. They're not even gonna pay
Yeah.
any attention anymore, so that cannot be your only strategy. And again, going back to that teacher voice idea, one of the ways that I think a lot of teachers lose instructional time is when they are correcting or they are giving a consequence of some time for a misbehavior, they engage in a debate and that will lose you time. And it's even aside from the time, we do not recommend engaging in debates with students at all. Like you say what the reality is and you move on. You don't debate it with students. You don't try to convince them that you're right. You don't try to get them to acknowledge that you're right. You tell them the reality and then you move on. And just refusing to dive into that debate will save classroom instructional time as well, because that back and forth just takes up so much more time when you add them all up over the days. So having pocket phrases ready to go, like this is not a discussion, or I already answered that, or things along those lines. Just having something in your pocket that you can just throw out to a kid and then move on and not reply to them when they try to argue with you can be really helpful in regaining that instructional time as well.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I agree wholeheartedly. Well, thank you, Becky, for sharing your thoughts. Thank you guys for listening. Hopefully, this gives you some good ideas heading into next year. But once again, we just kind of scratched the surface and talked very high level for a lot of what we talked about today. So make sure that you sign up for the free back to school classroom management and motivation training. It's free to attend. I hope you can be there live, but if you can't, sign up anyhow, and we'll send you the replay, Lord willing, if that's available. That link for that one more time is teachfortheheart.com/training. This episode has been brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. All views and opinions are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of the Herzog Foundation. Thank you guys so much for being here. I look forward to being with you again soon. In the meantime, teacher, remember, God is at work in you and through you, and He's using you to make a difference. Keep your eyes on Him and teach for the heart.